Welcome to Crash Course Debate. I'm Paxton, and today we're going to be covering the 1AR, and specifically the 1AR time split, which is one of the most important aspects of delivering a high-level 1AR. To preface, the 1AR time split refers to when you're flipping from one side of the flow to the other, so from the neg side of the flow to the AF, or the AF side of the flow to the neg. Now, let's just jump right into it with what comes first. And this is kind of the first area where the 1AR time split gets interesting. And it actually doesn't have to do with where the time split is at all, but what comes before the split and after the split. So there's a lot of contention over if neg or af should be covered first and which one is more strategic. But I don't really think that there's an exactly correct answer. And I think it really does depend on what's your skill level, where you are in your debate career, and a few other preferences that may go along with this decision. So the first thing when deciding this is that you want to be honest about your skill level when deciding. When we're thinking about if af should come before the split or neg should come before the split, there really is a decision that has to take place where you have to tell yourself, can you handle doing the neg first? And let me explain exactly why. So the AF first strategy is a little bit more novice friendly. It's a little bit more friendly to making mistakes, not having as much time discipline. But the neg strategy does have a higher ceiling at the cost of that higher risk. In my experience, neg first gives you a better chance of maximizing your 1AR, giving you the highest ability to gain from the 1AR and do the most advanced techniques, but it comes at a risk. Let me kind of explain what that risk is. When you're doing the negative first, it means that the AF is left to the final 2 minutes, which means that you might just run out of time and not be able to extend properly, might not be able to defend properly, and there might be critical drops on the AF side of the flow that really make it hard for you to come back, especially if the negative gets up and extends them in the next speech. The 2AR is kind of a lost cause. But the benefit of doing AF second is that you're ending with extensions, and if you have extra time from a quick neg coverage, then you have more time to do defending, more time to do extending, and the momentum is flowing right into your opponent's next speech. And most times, if you have really good extensions, it can flow right into the 2AR, setting yourself up for a really, really, really strong finish to the round, where you can already be kind of convincing the judge and have the judge thinking about their RFD before the 2NR even starts. Which is why I say that it's better to do the AF second, but it's also really difficult. And sometimes you just kind of get carried away covering the neg, you get carried away covering framing, and you get to the AF and you're just out of time. And at that point, you're in a lot of trouble. So, when making a decision of what you want to do first, it's important to know two things. First is that both strategies can be winning strategies. And second, that no matter what strategy you pick, you should be practicing it, you should be going over it, and you should be making sure that you know exactly where your split should be and what feels comfortable. So, with that question out of the way, let's get into the more particular parts of the speech, starting with framing. Now, the first thing to keep in mind is that framing is dangerous. I've seen so many rounds where the 1AR is completely, well, wasted for lack of a better term, because people spend so much time on framing not to actually gain anything. A way to envision the 1AR that most of your very high level debaters are envisioning it is that it's a zero sum allocation of time. If you give 1 second to framing at the top of the speech, that's 1 second that you're taking away from AF coverage at the end of the speech. So it's very important that you're using your time very efficiently. Remember, if you're using 10 seconds on an argument that isn't worth 10 seconds in this speech, you could be spending those 10 seconds somewhere better or somewhere that's going to give you a better chance at winning, then you should be doing that. My rule for framing is that 30 seconds should be an absolute maximum. The only exception is when framing is so essential to the round that you need to be covering it in detail. But this is a lot more rare than people give it credit for. In most traditional LD rounds, framings are either very similar or the difference is not significant enough to really warrant this much time to be spent on them. In most cases, you should be doing some defense, a reason to prefer yours, maybe some step back round analysis about how you win under both. But then you should frankly be moving on and just going to try to win both or win your opponents in impact calc. Really, the main job of the 1AR when it comes to framing is the things I just mentioned, but also clearing up the framing so that when you're going for your big 1AR arguments that you're extending into the 2AR, it's clearing up the round and it's making it less complicated. It's not recomplicating things where the 2AR's got to try to be the cleanup crew. You want to make sure that your 1AR is giving you a really easy and clear way to go get the ballot in the 2AR. So when it comes to framing, the big lessons to take away is be careful about your time allocation, keep it simple, and clear things up. Let's get on to the neg case. When we're talking about the neg case, if you're doing it first, if you're doing it second, it changes a little bit, and these are some more AF case rules, but assuming you're doing the neg case first, it's important that neg case and framing is done by the 2-minute mark. It's really, really, really important that you don't let the neg case run too long over this, because that can mean one of two things. First of all, your time management and efficiency just needs to improve, just frankly needs to improve and get better. And so that's a place to drill. Or you're overdoing it on some of the attacks and you're over covering the negative case when you should be, frankly, over covering the AF case and giving yourself more offensive arguments going into the last speech rather than defensive. And now that doesn't mean that there's not turns you can make on the negative, but typically you're doing a lot more defense on the negative side than you are doing offense on the affirmative side. Now, when it comes to the negative case and when it comes to attacking the negative case, you want to find a good balance of quantity and quality. You don't want to be the person that's up there reading 8 attacks on each contention, and you also don't want to be the person reading 1 attack on each contention. You want to find that good middle ground of about 3 to 4, and you want to make sure that you're reading turns on each point. So try to read a turn, read some defense, and then read maybe an impact outweighs argument about how it doesn't matter even if you buy this because AF outweighs. When you find a good combination of quality and quantity like that with 3 attacks that are all different enough so they're unique, but it's not so many that it's impossible to flow them all through or mention them all in the 2AR, that's when you find the really good middle ground. Going along with that is that you don't want these attacks to either be too long-winded or too blippy. Like I said, you want to find that good middle ground. What this does is it sets up the 2AR just as much as the AF coverage does on the AF side. You want to look for big turns, big solvency answers, things that you can bring up in the 2AR to be definitive arguments in the round. Remember, everything you do in the 1AR is setting up the 2AR for an AF win. So when you're attacking the negative case, you shouldn't just be getting up there and doing kind of minimize arguments or impact defense, unless the impact defense is very significant. You want to be doing arguments that are very, very significant and that a judge can find areas to vote for on these arguments. So like I said, that would be turns, that would be no solvency arguments, very, very big things. That brings us into the AF side of the case. Now, there's a lot of important things to do on the AF flow in a 1AR. And it's important to recognize what each of those are so that you're not kind of going into it blind. The first thing that's very important to do is defending in the 2AR. You want to, or in the 1AR, sorry. You want to make sure that the negative doesn't have big things that you're going to have to deal with in the 2AR. You really want to cover a lot of the negatives routes to the ballots that you can foresee them going for in the 2A or in the 1AR, so that in the 2AR you can kind of more so focus on why the affirmative wins rather than why the AF doesn't lose or why the negative doesn't win the round. So that means that when you're on the AF side of this case, you need to be doing a lot of clearing up and cleaning up, and then also extending once you do the defending. So it's not enough just to say that your first contention, for example, stands. You need to be telling us what the warrant of that contention is, what the impact of that contention is, and why it matters to the judge's ballot. You don't want to be leaving all this work of telling judges why it matters for the 2AR, because now you're just wasting time that the 2AR could be doing more round analysis and more ballot analysis and why you actually win the round on AF. So this is why I say that you should be saving the time from the rest of the speech and saving the AF for the end of this speech so you have the maximum amount of time to rebuild the AF's offense. And this is where you'd be doing that extending and using any extra seconds you have to just do any additional work you can do to set up the 2AR. Now, this 2-minute period of the 1AR is arguably the most important part of the entire round, and I would say the most important part of any speech in debate. This is where you determine if AF is going to win the round. AF needs to set up a clear enough ballot and clear enough warrants and impacts and extending so that the 2AR has something to go for that the 1NR or that the 2NR can't just take out and kind of close all the doors on. So when it comes to this next slide of practice makes perfect, That's something to keep in mind, that you really want to be focusing on that final split of the 1AR. But let's talk about practice. The 1AR is very difficult and takes time to learn how to do right. What you should be doing to practice is taking old 1ARs that you've done and try to apply some of these new ideas. Maybe record your 1AR and analyze them compared to high level recorded speeches at something like NSDA. Or if you have a varsity on your team or somebody who is, a senior and upperclassman that you look up to and want to try to debate like, it could be a good idea to watch their 1ARs and then try to copy some of the things that they're doing to win rounds. And as your 1AR time splits improve, so will your results. And as your efficiency improves, which is something of your time splits, your results will improve as well. Eventually, you'll be able to focus less on the timing of the 1AR and making sure that you're doing all these jobs within that 2-2 split and more on 1AR strategy and decision making, which is where you'll see yourself go from just giving a 1AR to dominating the 1AR.